It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, that's a great introduction, isn't it? That's John Schaefer. He's the sports director over at Channel 5 Sports. His dad, Max Schaefer, is an Iowa broadcasting legend, and John's on a podcast by George. Check him out. I think he's, podcast number 55, something like that. Anyway, it's a great podcast on a great young man that's got a great voice, so that's a great introduction. Today, we're going to be talking Joe Biden. That's right, Joe's back in town. He's going to go Joe again. He's going to take one more run at it, going to try to get that brass ring once more. He's going to run for president of the United States in 2020, announced last week, and he was introduced to a packed hall here in Iowa's capital city by Lisa Heddens. And Lisa's a state representative, and her son wasn't able to attend, she said, because he was training for his Special Olympics event. I mean, that's great, and I just wanted to bring that up because it's going to be a part of this first audio clip. But the other thing about it is, my God, did you read where the government, we can't afford the Special Olympics was the news here a few weeks ago. This is a country that's spending $2 trillion to upgrade its military weaponry, nuclear military weaponry, which isn't even necessary because the point of it is we're never going to use it proactively. We're never going to use it for first strike capability. I mean, the United States isn't going to go around attacking people with nuclear weapons. My God, I hope not anyway. And there's no reason to have them for reactive strikes, retaliatory strikes, because once the first one hits, once some nut job nation or rogue individual or whatever launches one of these damn things, a nuclear winter will ensue that doesn't make any difference. We're all going to die anyway. You're going to die or you're going to wish that you had of. So we're going to spend $2 trillion on that, and education secretary under Trump, that witchy woman, can't think of her name right now, but anyway, she's on in front of Congress or wherever telling us that we can't afford the Special Olympics. My God, what, are you kidding me? What have we become? But that's for another podcast. We're getting off track here. I digress. So let's listen, and he doesn't need any introduction, so I'm not going to go through his bona fides or his bio with Joe Biden. We're just going to let Lisa Heddens introduce him. And to kind of give you the feel for the thing, Joe Biden, he's an old guy. I don't know how else to tell you this. I mean, he really is. He's an old white guy. And the primaries right now are being led by these guys. You got Bernie, he's old, man. You got Joe Biden, he's old. And Joe's whipped thin. He looks great, but he's getting up there. And his presentation kind of seemed like that to me. And, of course, you got Donald Trump over there with the Republicans, and everybody talks about him. What they don't talk about with the guy very much is how old he is. But anyway, let's let Joe talk here right after he's introduced by State Representative Lisa Heddens in Des Moines.
I look out here and I see so many old friends who've been I've just admired and stayed friends for a long time. You know, one of the great things, the opportunity to run nationally is, it's a strange thing. People don't quite realize, I don't think. The people who you get to work with are people who become your friends. And I want to start off by saying, as we used to say in the Senate, Lisa, a point of personal privilege in the United States Senate. I want to thank you for the way you received when he was out here, my son Bo. And I want to thank so many of you as I look around the room for the condolences and the heartfelt condolences when we lost Bo. I really mean it. I really, really mean it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And by the way, the fact is that I know things are going all right because the reason is it had nothing to do with polling. It has to do with Neil Smith being here. Congressman, how are you doing, pal? You're the best. He's the best. God love you, Neil. Thank you. Thank you. And Lisa, you have been a great friend for a long time. And your Paul's son is remarkable. You know, everybody goes through tough times in their lives. And but what I find amazing is that people who in fact go through tough times and have really difficult times, and they never give up. They never stop. They never slow up. And I wish you could all meet Paul. Although I haven't seen Paul in a little while. But, you know, the Beau Biden Foundation, which is a foundation for that was set up because of trying to prevent abuse against children. The fact is they've joined with the Special Olympics to form a combination together as to promote the fact that we have to be together and helping people around, across the board. And I just think have any of you ever been to a Special Olympics event? It's something else, isn't it? It's something else. And it's a little bit like you see in the Warrior Games, which I've been, for real, and watching these. Anyway, I shouldn't get off on that. But look, the good news for me, the bad news for you, you're going to see an awful lot of me between now and the caucus. No one's going to work harder to win your trust and support. No one's going to work harder to be able to give a shot at being able to win this caucus. And so I want to thank you very much. So folks, you know, I'm here with the folks that, as we say used to say in Scranton, the folks that brung me to the dance.
So if you've been around as long as Joe, you've got a lot of friends, particularly in the Democratic Party, and it takes him a long time to get them all thanked here at the beginning. There's nothing wrong with that. Joe's a good man. He's had a lot of tragedy in his life. You'll hear a little bit more about that here very shortly. When it comes to the subject of friends, though, I'm going to start off with some negative things about Joe Biden, and this is a big one. He announced his candidacy the night that he announced in the home of the CEO of Comcast. Joe's out of Delaware. A lot of Democrats, a lot of progressives in particular, are very concerned about the control on the country by big money. And when I say Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware is the home of like over 60% of the Fortune 500 companies in America. So he's always represented the wealthy part of the Democratic Party. That's where he's based. And he's used those guys, and he knows how to use them, and he knows how to get their money, which in politics isn't necessarily a bad thing. But on the night of his announcement, he was in the home of the CEO of Comcast. That's where Joe Biden chose to announce a multi-million-dollar media megalomaniac, if you want to call that, the owner of, this is the guy that owns not only Comcast, but NBC and MSNBC. And I got to tell you, I'm not too crazy about that because I really loathe the connection between Donald Trump and Fox and Roger Ailes and all that stuff going back decades, and what a slimy, rotten, stinking mess that is. Well, MSNBC and the connection with Joe Biden and NBC, that's where he chooses to announce his candidacy. And unlike so many of the other candidates that we've had on Podcast by George that are taking small donations, $5, $10, $15, $20, and that's how they're building their war chest for their campaigns, Joe's going right at this big money. I think they're limited to about $2,500 per contribution at events like his announcement, but that's where he's going to get his dough. That's how he does it. That's a distinct difference. But I wanted to bring that up right off the hop. Let's get back to the stump speech here.
I want to tell you, you have here the International Firefighters Association that was foolish enough to endorse me. God love them. I don't know where you guys are. You know, firefighters and law enforcement are the only guys that run into fires instead of away from them, and run into trouble when they hear it. So folks, and I have to, as again, a point of personal privilege, I owe the firefighters back in my state. They saved my life, literally getting me in the hospital in the middle of a snowstorm to have a 13-hour operation that saved my life way back when I had those brain aneurysms that were, and they saved my life. And when you met Bo and you met my son Hunter, when their mom and dad, their mom and their sister were killed in that tractor trailer, they hit accident broadside of them. It took them over 3 hours in the jaws of life to get my boys out, and they saved their lives. And then when I was away 20-some years ago doing Meet the Press, lightning struck my house, and they saved my house and Jill. And so I owe you big, man. I understand that I was told by the reporter from the Des Moines Register that yesterday President Trump tweeted about me 50 times. I wonder why he's doing that. I wonder why he is doing that. Whoa, anyway.
Okay, so to jump back in here, why is Donald Trump tweeting so furiously about Joe Biden? Well, that's what Trump does. He's a tweeting idiot. By his own claim, he's the Hemingway of Twitter. That's what Trump says. But the other thing about it is, I don't know, I almost want to give Trump more credit than he's probably due. Could he be wise enough to know that Joe Biden running against him might be the best thing that ever happened to him? And here's why. Trump beat Hillary Clinton. He'd beat Hillary Clinton again. One of the reasons that he beat her was because there are some people in this country, in these disaffected former factory towns, these people that are hurting economically in this country, that never saw the resurgence, never came back after the economy went away in their industrialized areas. And I'm talking about Pennsylvania, I'm talking about Michigan and Wisconsin. They're never going to vote for these old line Democratic politics or politicians that they got no help from. And they didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, and I don't think they'll vote for Joe Biden. And if they don't vote for the Democratic nominee this time around, Trump will probably win easy in 2020. Now, he's already got a head start, Trump does. Most incumbent presidents get reelected. Yeah, by far. The Electoral College map is still in his favor. He has held on to his base, and because of this Russiagate fiasco that didn't pan out, he may actually add to it, but he's certainly going to hold on to it. So get ready. Here comes a formidable Donald Trump in 2020, unless something happens with obstruction charges or something that isn't happening right now. He's going to be a tough candidate to beat. Now, that said, those districts that I mentioned earlier, those little pockets in those states that Hillary Clinton didn't even campaign in and didn't carry, that led largely, according to the pundits, to Trump's victory in 2016, those districts went blue in 2018 in the off-term, the off-year election. But why did they do that? Well, maybe those people came to their senses and saw the horror of the Trump presidency and decided, God, I'm going to go back and vote Democratic like I used to. Let's hope that was the case. Or maybe it's because different candidates were running. Younger, women, people of color, not these old guys and women, not the old line Democrats running. They voted for them in 2018. They might vote for them again in 2020. But are they going to vote for Joe? I don't know. Let's pick it up.
Look, folks, on a serious note, you really know in your gut, you can feel it in your bones. This is the most important election, not because I'm running, the most important election that we've faced in modern history. There's so much at stake. Literally the core values of this nation are at stake. And our standing in the world, our very democracy, in my view. And I don't think that's hyperbole. Everything that's made America America is at stake. And you know why? Because, here's the deal. And by the way, I want you all to know, I see a lot of young people out here. Young folks, I'm told, on college campuses and across the country. And I've spent a lot of time on college campuses. I'm a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and I also have an institute at the University of Delaware. Spent a lot of time with them. One thing you all should know, They are the brightest, most informed, most open-minded generation in history. And here's the deal. They get it. You all think this is all about extraneous things. They get it. They understand how deeply all of their future is at stake. I mean, they really do. And now the one thing that's happened a little bit like my generation, when finally after King and Kennedy were assassinated, Robert Kennedy, my two heroes, our generation, that generation before me said, we're going to drop out. Don't get engaged in politics. It's bad. It's dirty. Nixon. Well, guess what? They've reached the same point we reached. Enough is enough, man. They're in. They're involved. They know the only way to change it is to get engaged. So I want to thank them. And by the way, if that generation votes the same percentage the rest of American voters vote, there would have been 5.7 million more votes last year, and I mean in the general election, and there wouldn't have been any doubt. You guys can own the election, not a joke. You can own it. Own it. And the primary, if you want. And so, folks, but 4 more years of this president will be viewed, if we end it with only 4 years, he's going to go down in history as an aberrant moment in American history. But there's 8 years. I honest to God believe he will fundamentally change this country, fundamentally change the character of the nation. We can't let it happen. We cannot let it happen. The rest of the world's looking at us and like, what in Lord's name is going on? No, I'm serious. We are losing our standing in the world in a way that's going to make it much more dangerous for us. How can we deal with the continued threat of terrorism, which is not state-based as much anymore? How can we do that without the cooperation of all the other countries? You know, we've always led the world, not just by the example of our power. We have the most strongest military in the history of the world. We've led by the power of our example. That's why the rest of the world has followed us. No, I really mean it. That's why they've joined us. And we're losing that. I really mean it. And it means a great deal. So, folks, look, the threat he poses to this nation is more than any threat in at least my lifetime. And we saw it vividly in Charlottesville. We saw it vividly when you saw racist and white supremacists coming out of the fields, carrying torches, climbing out of under rocks, chanting hate and spewing division, carrying Nazi flags, singing the same exact chants. The same language is used in Europe in the 30s. And what was said by the alt-right, and I don't think any president's ever said anything like this, Democrat or Republican. When asked about it, he said those people who came out to oppose the hate, decent Americans to say stop. What happened? There was a clash. He was asked his view, and he said, well, I want to make sure I quote him exactly right. There were decent people in both groups. Come on, man. No, I know, but think the message is sent to the United States of America, to the people, to be precise. Very fine people on both sides. Very fine people. Now, he got very upset when I wrote about that back then, in 17. And I think he got upset when I said that's the fundamental reason why I'm running for president this time in my opening video. And then he came out and the press said, well, Biden's got it all wrong. Let me tell you what I was really talking about. I was really talking about there were just a lot of good people going to try to prevent Robert Lee's statue from being toppled. It was advertised as a racist rally. It was advertised that way. You could not, and you saw it on television, you could not fail to hear the anti-Semitic bile. You could not fail to hear the chants. So, folks, this is not who we are. And I said then, and I say it again, and I genuinely mean it. We're in the battle for the soul of this nation. It's not who we are. It's not who we are. And, folks, the stakes are high.
Charlottesville and Trump's comments about it. What a low mark in American history. But, you know, I was a little taken aback by that at the presentation. I recall that he mentioned that when he was running, and I remember that op-ed piece that he wrote in 2017 that he referenced there. But I got to admit, out of everything that's going on right now, all the contemporary news at this rally, and I'm thinking Mueller report, I'm thinking Venezuela, I'm thinking about all these other things, I was a little surprised to hear Charlottesville brought up. It's a big deal. Don't get me wrong. I don't, pick on me about this. I could see a guy running for president to want to do something about that. I mean, somebody was killed there, for God's sake. But it seemed a little dated to me. It seemed to me that I don't know. It's like, Joe, where you been the last year? I was kind of surprised to hear the Rosetta Stone for him be Charlottesville. But I guess, in all honesty, if you're going to have a Rosetta Stone, that ain't a bad one. I love that term, Rosetta Stone, by the way. You've probably heard me use that in other podcasts, but you know what I mean. His touchstone, his go-to issue is Charlottesville. Let's continue.
The stakes are high because the real stakes beyond that are we have to restore the backbone of this country. The backbone of this country has always been hardworking, middle-class people. When you give ordinary people an even chance, they do extraordinary things. Let's get something straight. It's not Wall Street and bankers and hedge fund managers that build America. You all build America. No, and it's not hyperbole. You build America. Average, ordinary men who've risen up and done great things. Because you're all taught. You're all taught there's nothing you can't do. There's a requirement to be decent. And by the way, here's the deal that's happened, in my view. I think what's happened is that America's middle class, ordinary people have done these extraordinary things. They're worried. They're really worried. In my state, yours, all across the country. I went into 22 states campaigning for people last year. 69 candidates. And what I found, no matter where I went, Democrats and Republicans, they're worried about what's going to happen to them. They're worried about what comes next. They're worried about whether or not we are listening. And the middle class dream is, from their view, literally slipping from their hands. It's getting out of reach. And over 35% of them don't believe that their children will ever, ever, ever be able to achieve that dream. You're all raised like I was. If you work hard, get an even chance, you can do anything. There's nothing for real. Nothing you can't do. But what's happened? What's happened? A lot of people no longer believe that. And I think the reason for that is, how did it happen? I think it happened because there used to be a basic bargain in the United States of America. That bargain in the United States of America used to be that if you contributed to the welfare of the enterprise you worked with, you got to share in the profits. That's no longer the case. That bargain's been broken. Look what's happened now. Corporate America has made a decision that the only obligation they have is the stockholders, they're so-called job creators. Since when are the people who grow the grain, ship it? Since when are the people who make the automobiles and sell them? Since when do people who work as salespersons in these organizations across the country selling product, since when are they not job creators? When did that happen? How did that come about? When did it come? Well, I tell you when it came. It came when we changed about 15, 18 years ago the notion that there's only one obligation that people have, that corporations have, and it's to their stockholders. Simply not true.
Well, here, Joe, that's exactly right. It's not true. It should never be that way, and let's hope that the world changes, although where stockholders and money are involved, and less the government intercedes, I got a feeling that's the way that it's going to be. The other thing about this is, I don't want this to be a big hatchet job on Joe Biden. Joe's done his best. He's tried hard. He's done some great things. The Obama presidency overall, I believe, was very good for the country. The ACA in particular was a good start, but man, does it need some improvement. And Joe Biden was along for that. He was Secretary of State. He was the U.S. Senator. That was the other thing. When he starts talking about 15 or 18 years ago, you know what else happened then? It was the Iraq War. It was the run-up. It was the selling of the Iraq War to the American people based on WMDs, based on weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, and possible nuclear weapons in the hands of Saddam Hussein. And you'll hear me talk about this a lot on Podcast by George. This is like the big issue right next to climate change and a couple of other things. My God almighty, people. We went into Iraq chasing that guy around, killed 500,000 civilians in the process. Estimates vary all over the map on that, but I go back to Rumsfeld or Cheney or one of those guys admitted to 200,000 or 300,000 civilian deaths as a result of that, and no WMDs. That McBoob George Bush was on Saturday Night Live back in the day joking about not being able to find WMDs underneath his office desk, and women and children and babies being killed in Iraq to the tune of hundreds of thousands. And who voted for that? Who was a part of that? Yeah, Joe Biden. So, and I don't want to be too hard on Joe. This is just his kickoff speech. I know he's got supporters. I've got friends that are believers in him that I think are already on his bandwagon, but I'm not yet. And I don't know if I can even get a leg up on that bandwagon because of that Iraq war vote. And it isn't like, don't let everybody tell you, well, everybody supported it. Well, I want to tell you something. A lot of the media did. Some of the media didn't. Go search out those folks. Read those folks. Watch those people. A lot of politicians did. Yeah, that's true. Most of them did. I think that may be true. But some of them didn't. Support those folks. Find them. They made that decision. And most Americans did. I've been told that, yeah, they may have, but I'll tell you somebody that didn't. I didn't. You can find people that can confirm that. I was on a street corner holding a sign. Were you? Was Joe? I don't think so. I think he was telling us that we needed to go to war and that those people needed to die for nothing, and maybe worse than nothing. We're told today that the circumstances are worse over there than when we went in. And what was the purpose of that? Was it really for WMDs that weren't there? The CIA had satellite photos of transport trucks that turned out to be ice cream trucks. Yeah. Transport trucks for WMDs that turned out to be driving ice cream around the streets of Baghdad. Colin Powell had those photos in front of Congress. But that's a topic for another podcast. So let's leave it there. We're about out of time. We'll get to Joe Biden more. Like he said, he's going to be out there enough that you maybe literally will get sick of him. I don't know. If you're a real political junkie, you probably won't. We'll get back to Joe. We'll circle around. We're going to have most, if not all of these candidates on. I'm trying, but with 22 of them out there right now and more coming all the time, it's hard to keep up. But that's Joe Biden announcing his 2020 candidacy for President of the United States with his kickoff speech in the Heartland. And that's another podcast by George.